Good evening, everybody. Good afternoon. Good morning, in fact, if you are watching in a different time zone somewhere else in the world other than the UK. Welcome to this Farmers Weekly Transition webinar. My name's Johan Tasker. I'm your host for this evening, this event. We're looking at measuring success, improving farm business performance, and I'm joined by four experts in their respective fields. I'm going to introduce them one by one, and then we'll go straight into some questions. We already have some questions. If you'd like to submit some questions yourself while the event's going on, please do use the question facility, which I'm sure you can see on your screens. But without further ado, our experts this evening. Roddy McLean is Director of Agriculture for NatWest. His responsibilities include helping ensure the bank's policy towards agriculture continues to be fit for purpose, supporting the bank's 125 relationship managers and keeping them informed on current farming issues and providing advice on more complex agricultural lending propositions, as well as representing the bank on public platforms. Hampshire farmer Andy Bason farms about 800 hectares. Enterprises include winter wheat, spring barley, spring beans, oats, linseed and oilseed rape. Andy is one of our transition farmers, which means that he's heavily involved with the transition project that we run at Farmers Weekly. He's been kind enough to host a farm walk on the farm, which he looks after. His transition goals in terms of trying to achieve a more sustainable future for the farm business, and that is both environmentally and financially, include a 30% cut in carbon emissions, establishing 10 hectares of agroforestry, and establishing Woodland 2. Piers Costley is Vice President for Operations and Director of Farm Management Experts Farm Plan. Piers joined ProAgrica almost 30 years ago and now manages the Farm Plan product suite and acts as VP Operations across the ProAgrica Solutions portfolio. He focuses his time on helping to deliver ProAgrica's farm management solutions throughout the Farm Plan portfolio here in the UK, delivering outstanding customer service as well as business growth, product innovation and enhanced value for all customers. And last but by no means least, David Linton from Barenbrug has almost 30 years experience in the seed sector, having joined the company in the year 2000. Combining a qualification in agri-food science with experience gained on his own farm in Northern Ireland, he offers a wealth of practical and technical knowledge. David is a well-known figure across Northern Ireland and is the current president of the Ulster Grassland Society, and his local knowledge of the farming scene in Northern Ireland is second to none. And he's particularly proud of the Bar Forage grass seed range, which he feels has set a new standard in grassland production and quality. So everybody on the panel, everybody listening, these are your experts this evening. Let's do make good use of them. I'm going to start with, I described it before we came on air as perhaps a simple question, but perhaps it's not so much a simple question. And it's about measuring success. How should we start? And I'm gonna start with you, Roddy McLean. How should we start when we set out on this journey of trying to improve farm business performance?
Thanks, Johan. Good evening, everybody. To my mind, you can't start on a journey before you know where you're at. So you need to establish some baseline, current performance. If you're talking about carbon, involving a carbon tool, yes, there are issues with those, but you need to get a start point, and then you need to plan what your end point has to be, and you need some checkpoints in between to ensure that you're on track. And if you're not on track, you need to then think, why am I not on track? What changes can I make to get back to where I expect to be? Or if that's not possible, I'm on track to a new end endpoint.
Thanks, Roddy. And I guess
That,
I guess I mean your experiences with NatWest, with banking. I mean, people will probably think that's from a financial point of view when you're starting out, but there's going to be sort of personal goals there as well, I guess.
absolutely. It's something I wish I paid slightly more attention in my earlier years about where I wanted to go, when I expected to be there. So it applies not just to finance, it applies to wider family issues, succession, etc. How you want the business to develop, and every aspect of life, you need to have a plan. You need to know where you're starting and where you're going, or where you would like to go to, shall we say, and accept that it's never a straight line. There will be bumps in the road, so to speak, and hurdles to get over, but that's when you step back, regroup, and go again.
Thanks, Roddy. Piers, I'm going to come to you. I mean, this is a sort of bread and butter to you guys at FarmPlan and ProAgrica, I guess. Data, information, knowing where you are, knowing where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way I'd go about this to start with is the old adage: if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And it's as Roddy said, it's creating that baseline, taking whatever data you've got and being able to use it to value. And what I've always thought over the years is that there's so much data that has to be recorded on farm for compliance reasons. We know what we have to do. We have to record animal movements. We have to record crop inputs. We have to record nutrient management. So if we've got to do all those things, by doing it in a standardized and organized way, by adding a little bit of extra detail to it, just by spending that little bit of extra time doing that, then you can build up a very useful source of data that can be used for multiple other purposes. And it helps us, as Roddy said, create that baseline. Then you can see where you're starting from, where your journey is going to go, and how you measure it along the way. I think there's so many variables in farming. We always know about the weather, but there are so many different variables. Every year, things throw up different challenges. And so we can't record everything as we would do as if we're in a factory operation. But understanding those bits that we can measure then gives us a baseline for moving on.
Thank you. I think everybody on the panel today has farming experience to varying degrees. Andy, I know this is a big thing for you. Obviously, it occupies most of your time. I'm going to come to you in a minute, but David, what's your take on this? Where do you start? How should you start?
Yeah, well, I think certainly going from past experience, long gone are the days where you know whether or not you've had a good year, whether or not you've had to pay tax at the end of it. And unfortunately, certainly over here, I'm talking to people day in, day out here still saying, well, we had to pay tax, so we must have made money. And those days are gone. But just to pick up on the point that was already made, if you want to manage, you have to measure. And certainly, there's no doubt about it. I would have two concerns, and one has already been touched on very briefly. I suppose my first concern is the mindset or the skill set for some of the situations that people, understanding data that they're being provided with. I know here in Northern Ireland at the minute, between DAERA and AFBI, they're doing a massive soil sampling project right across the whole country. And thankfully, CAFRE, Basic Green Mountain College, are in the process now of actually teaching people how to understand the soil sample results that they get. And I think that's a big issue, that we can provide as much data as we want, but unless people actually understand the data that they're getting, it's not going to be an awful lot of use to them. And just another point that Roddy made earlier on, yeah, it's fine measuring success in your lifetime, but probably you will be judged on the success for the generation that's coming behind you. And certainly, if you don't accumulate data now in your lifetime, what's the next generation going to look back on to see whether or not they've stepped up or to see whether or not they're starting to lag behind? And I think that is very important.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Andy, you're on this. I don't always like to use the word journey, but you are on. Yeah. But where did you start? How did you start, and where did you start?
How far back do you want me to go?
Well, in terms of there would have been a point where you set out to improve your farm business performance and start measuring your success, presumably. So, yeah.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. We seem to spend our whole lives measuring as farmers in one way or another. We've been collecting yield data for the last probably 10 years properly, I suppose, probably longer than that. We know probably not quite so accurately. And actually, only now are we starting to have the technology behind us and the understanding of what those yield maps can give us, and what we can get from it. And I think that's really important going into this sort of era of SFI and the like. Understanding which parts of our fields are not performing. And I think actually when you start to look at that data, and put it all together and as a field performance map, for example, you can really then start to appreciate where we should be not farming, if you like, which areas of the farm, which areas of the field we shouldn't be farming. And I think that's sort of one side of it. But I think as has been touched on earlier, you've got to know what's in front of you as well, and sort of play to the strengths of your farm. Know your soil type, know your know the climate around you. So there's a lot to sort of consider, but we're constantly measuring and trying to evolve as we go along.
So you started by measuring. You would have also had a plan, presumably a goal that you wanted to get to. How did you decide that?
Well, the goal is to make some money, obviously, but we're dictated obviously by the weather and by grain prices, all the things that we know about. So as I say, we have to make money. That's the goal. But in doing so, we have to, consider the environment, consider the sort of the well-being of our staff, all these kind of things that we know about. So there are huge things to consider. But starting off slowly but surely, measuring what you can measure, and then just tweaking it as we go along. I think it's really important. Not try to do anything too radical too quickly.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm not necessarily gonna go around in the same order each time, but I'm gonna come back to Roddy. There's this sort of saying that in military terms, at least, that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. You might have a plan, and then something will happen as you try to implement it that it goes wrong, or you have to be adaptable. Is what I'm getting at. You've got to be adaptable. You've got to be flexible. Is that right, Roddy?
Absolutely, Johan. And I think in the current environment, you have to be willing to be agile. Sorry, there's lots of volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, etc. It's not like 20 or 30 years ago where things were relatively stable, and if you made this decision, you had more certainty of what the outcome would be. So I think there's so much going on that impacts the business. You have to have that. Try and have that mindset to be agile and to react accordingly to best benefit of your business, the farm, your family.
Thank you. So we've already got some key messages coming out there. Measure where you are, know where you want to get to, have a plan, know where the areas of the business, which are performing and those which are performing less well, be flexible, agile, and adaptable. David, in your experience, how easy is it to achieve all of these things?
Yeah, it's not easy, but sure, nothing is. But at the end of the day, if you get a good starting point, and people say you should never look back, but if you don't look back, you've nothing to compare to. And if you are comparing, should it be different fields? Should it be how a crop is performed in a different field? Should it be as simple as selecting bulls for livestock production? Any of those things, step in, try it. If it doesn't work, don't be ashamed to say it didn't work, and step back out again and try something completely different. But yeah, there's nothing easy, but certainly it is doable.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start asking some questions now from the that have been submitted. We've got a question here. I'm going to throw this one to you, Piers. This is a question from Andrew Wilson, who says there are two parts to this question, but I'm going to focus on the second part of this question, which is very, very succinct. He's sort of saying, is bigger really more efficient?
No, I don't think necessarily bigger is more efficient. I think with farming businesses, you tend to find that there's steps, and you need to understand with your business where those steps are. So whether you're measuring your output or your efficiency against your workforce or against machinery, there's all sorts of different levels that you can measure it on. So if you've got a combine that's running flat out over 2,000 hectares, or whatever the land is, getting another 100 hectares means you have to get a second combine. That's not going to be more efficient. There will be those natural steps as to where you get to go to. So you need to find the sweet spot. You need to make sure the machinery, your workforce, all those other factors that come into play. Where are those steps? Where are those little steps? And then what is the next step up? So if you do want to grow the business, you need to identify where you need to get to next and how you're going to get to that next step.
Thank you. Andy, for you, is bigger more efficient?
No, I don't think so. Not necessarily. I think you've got to be good at what you're doing, understand where your strengths and weaknesses are, and play to those. I don't think necessarily bigger is better. I think we've got a bit bigger recently. We took on a contract farm that was about spreading our fixed costs, and which we've done. I feel that we're in a position now at with about 1,000 hectares all in of arable. We're at a size now where we're able to control our destiny a little bit and be efficient and still provide a good service. And for us, it is about providing a good service to our contract farm and ourselves. But certainly our contract farm, we want to look after them. We want to be efficient. We want to provide a service that's perhaps above and beyond just farming. We like to think we provide an estate service. It's difficult to quantify that, I suppose, from a financial point of view. But I don't think we would necessarily be looking for any more land to be bigger and better, or necessarily better. But I think where we are is about right, actually.
And David Linton, I mean that's got to be true. Yeah, land's difficult to come by, and so expanding is going to be difficult for a lot of people, be it either purchasing it or taking on a new contract farm or whatever it might be. So bigger, it's not always the answer to increase efficiency.
No, and to be fair, Northern Ireland, some of the smallest farms in the UK, and arguably I've been on many small farms who are probably some of the most efficient and profitable businesses that are out there in this country. We would be somewhat different to what happens in mainland UK, in that we still work on a con-acre basis that runs sort of on an annual agreement. And certainly, the upside to that is if you wanted to expand, TB being an instance here. For instance, if a farm goes down with TB and they can't get rid of stock, maybe they're forced to expand, maybe they're forced to take on extra land. The downside to it is you're taking on that land for probably only a 12-month period. And unless you're prepared to be the highest bidder come November, you won't have it for the following 12 months. So there's a whole lot of pitfalls. TB being one of the examples where, yes, you're maybe forced to become bigger very, very shortly or on a very short-term basis. But definitely, I would agree with the other two speakers that no, not necessarily. Some of the most efficient farms and profitable businesses that I've called on in Northern Ireland are not some of the bigger ones.
Thank you. And Roddy, I mean, I said there are two parts to this question, and feel free to address the is bigger really more efficient part. But Andrew's the first part of Andrew Wilson's question, he says, if you're not investing, arguably you're going backwards. Is there a debt turnover or debt profit ratio beyond which efficiency becomes inefficiency? So a little bit of a sort of technical question there, certainly in financial terms.
There is a long-standing proxy for that. Whereas if you look at the gross output that the business is producing, so that's turnover adjusted for valuation changes and compare its finance costs, so any rent charges, interest charges across all forms of borrowing, and look at the percentage of that. And it's a benchmark, it's a guide, but once those get above sort of 15 mid-teens, it has been a warning flag that you're perhaps getting overly burdened by debt. There is an argument to say that at lower interest rates, that should probably be a lower warning flag, because if interest rates go up, it leaves you in a more challenging situation. So that's one. And I guess the other one is it's more important than that is being able to generate the cash to service the debt. That is what's key for a bank. Is there a sustainable cash generation that can service both the interest and the repayment of the debt?
Thank you. There's a question here. I'm going to tweak it a little bit, but it's from Tom Ottaway, who says advice to new entrants to farming on identifying a feasible farm business. I mean, sticking with you, Roddy. I mean, identifying whether the business is viable or feasible in the first place. Is there an easy way to do that, or a simple way? Not just for new entrants, perhaps, but for everybody, sort of looking at their business and deciding. I guess in the first place, is this a viable business? Am I starting from the right place?
If I pick up on what Tom's asking about, it's very much part of the assessment is the ability and the track record of the individual to know. I in my career have seen and been party producing very good plans for a customer, for a client to go to a bank. But it all hinges on the ability of that individual to deliver in practice what he has put down on paper. For a new entrant, it is particularly difficult because even a modest tractor or a couple of hundred breeding ewes is not an insignificant sum of capital. And they need to come with a stake in that. They'll not be. I can't see a case where they would be able to borrow all the finance. So it's difficult. We have a lending as a bank. We have a lending policy that we work within. But for the right individual in the right circumstance, we will stretch that to allow them to get a start. It is very much down to the overall holistic picture of what's being done, capabilities, track record, and our belief that they can deliver.
Thank you. Piers, for you, a way of identifying a feasible and viable farm business?
Well, I think it's probably a little bit outside my normal job range here, but yeah, I think it's coming up with the right plan and testing that plan, and being realistic about that plan. If you, as Roddy said, we can have great plans, but as we've seen over recent years, the volatility in the markets in terms of input and output prices, there's not many people who would have planned for those sorts of vagaries in the market. So you do have to, I think, test these plans and push them to a degree, and then have a fallback position. If this does happen, what can I do? How can I get out of it? What changes can I make to that? So I think it's about having that flexibility. As Roddy said, it's interesting that the emphasis the banks put on the individual, on the capabilities of the individual. But I think a good solid business plan always has strength and flexibility to move and change position as they go, rather than being a very fixed plan.
And without turning this into an advert, as it were, for Farm Plan, presumably the sort of software that you have, you can run various scenarios fairly simply by changing various parameters, etc., and that's going to make for a more robust business plan, or certainly enable you to adapt your business plan and your goals and the way you're going about according to various different scenarios.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think it's just about a business plan. It's running a business, the day-to-day running of a business. And, I'd say this about any business, farming or not, that, that individuals will have a knowledge of what's going on in that business. They'll probably know how to react to different situations. If prices change, if things happen externally to the business and they need to react, they'll probably have a gut feeling or an instinct of how to react. But having that data behind you, having that track record of being able to just double check that your gut feeling, your instincts are right, and you can prove that they're right and that that's going in the right direction, and you can monitor that on an ongoing basis, is really important, because gut feeling and instincts are not always right. And so, but having that backup of having the data, and being able to measure and monitor as you're going is vitally important.
Thank you, David. Is there anything that you want to add to this particular point in terms of?
To be fair, it's a bit far out.
Yeah,
for a new starter going in, it's a big ask. That's probably all I would say. And certainly you'd want to be taking plenty of advice and taking some long hard thoughts about it before you go that before you make the move, because it's a big step.
Thank you. I'm going to move on. There's another question here from Simon Parker, Newcastle University senior lecturer, who says, and this one's coming at you, Andy Bason, as a tutor of farm business management, my students tend to spend a significant amount of time and effort examining gross margins, fixed costs, support mechanisms, benchmark data, etc. Does the panel spend their managerial time and effort reviewing financial records associated with production, or is your attention more focused on tangible aspects of farm operations? So what are you concerned about? Or maybe you might be concerned with issues that were once considered peripheral to management, such as supply chain management, marketing strategy, etc. So where I guess what Simon's getting at is, where is your attention being directed at the moment, Andy?
So that's quite a timely question, actually. So we just last week we had our annual farm bench meeting. So we've got a group of about 12 local farmers, and it's a carryover from when we were a monitor farm for ASDB. We set up this benchmarking group. We use their farm bench system, and we put all of our data in. So we put 23 harvest data into the system, and we sit around the table and we talk about it. And actually, it's really, really rewarding. Not necessarily going into massive detail or massive comparisons with the figures, but actually just sounding each other out as to what we're doing, different methods. For me, the variable costs are actually what I kind of I'm interested in when I'm comparing with other farmers, because those are the costs that I have an influence over. The fixed costs, it's difficult to compare fixed costs with one farm to another, because they all have slightly different ways of inputting those figures in. So actually, the variable costs have, over the 7 or 8 years that I've been doing it, I've been benchmarking, we have highlighted some areas where we can improve, and actually it's been invaluable. And whether that's home saving seed, which we weren't doing much of, and others were. We had a discussion this last meeting about sewage sludge and the benefits of sewage sludge, and we don't need to go into that now, but it's interesting. So just little topics kind of pop up in these benchmarking meetings, and I think it's really important to sit down with other farmers and discuss those costs. As farmers, we've always been a bit scared, if you like, to do that, I think, and I think it's nice now. I think we've turned a corner, and we can sit down and openly discuss what we're spending, and I think that's really, really important to learn from each other.
Thank you, Roddy. How about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with Andy. I think in general, it's important that the management team of the farm make time to work on their business rather than in their business. And by that I mean, rather than doing full-face, which is important, their managerial input to the business is better sitting back, taking the lead to where the business is going and what needs to be done, rather than in at the coalface with the picks sitting on the tractor doing the job. There are many people that can do that. And I think, to Andy's point, comparing decisions, the best ideas come from farmers to farmers, and they learn and gain most from each other's circumstance and what has happened to them. Me as a banker standing on a platform saying you need to go do this isn't going to wash and have the same impact as whether it's a neighbour, somebody in the next county, or some good ideas coming from other areas of the globe that we can lift and shift and transfer and make applicable to the UK situation. Is all good.
Thank you. Piers, I'll ask you about this. Presumably, Farm Plan Software is going to look at other aspects of the business, not just the financial stuff. So, yeah, I mean, if we move to something like carbon, you also deal with that. So it's an increasing point of focus for many food producers.
Yeah, and the carbon issue is quite an interesting one, and we've spent a lot of time looking at that over the last few years. You know, there was I suppose an instinctive thought that we should get involved in that straight away in terms of carbon calculations and such like, using the data that we that's being stored on farm, but which is relevant to this. But I think we decided that we didn't want to be directly involved in this, but that we could work with others to supply that core data. And I think from that has come out one of the challenges from that is that a lot of the platforms that are around at the moment weren't designed to share data, weren't designed to pull data together on a mass basis. They were designed for individual farmers and businesses to use for their own purposes. So one of the global challenges around farming at the moment in data is a lack of standardization. There's very little standardization of data across the world. So when we're trying to export crop management data into another platform, so we link up with people like Trinity AgTech and be able to push the data into their systems, it does represent a challenge because at the moment there's that lack of standardization. I mean, it's something that we're addressing, we're looking at, we're building into new platforms going forwards, and I think that's going to be a real game changer for farming. So it's interesting, Andy was saying about the farm bench type scenarios where I'm a great believer in those sorts of platforms where people get together and can compare that base data together, and discuss why there are differences, because very often it's just because things have been recorded differently, or their farm is set up in a particularly different way, or there's always variations. There's no two farms that are the same. But I think that core data, benchmark data, gives you a start point for those discussions. I don't think where we are at the moment allows you to take 1,000 farms data, mush it into a big computer and come up with the answer to anything, really. I just don't think we've got the standardization there, all of the various variables that happen in farming just don't really allow that. It's something that again, Andy said at the start of talking about the yield data, yield files, yield data that's coming off combines, or NDVI data from satellites at the moment. It's all great stuff. And if you know that field, then it means something to you. So you and your advisor and people who know that field can look at an NDVI map and understand why there are good bits, why there are bad bits, or it may highlight an area that you're not aware of and that need to go and investigate and do something about. But I don't think you can really do that at a mass level at the moment. It doesn't really mean a computer can't tell you what to do in that situation, but it can give you the direction. It can point you in the right direction.
Thank you. And David, are you spending a significant amount of your time examining gross margins, fixed costs, and benchmarking data? Or are you focusing on other aspects of production and the more sort of tangible aspects of farming operations?
I suppose from our point of view, maybe looking at it from a grassseed point of view rather than from a home farm point of view, the biggest issue with us, and I think somebody's already touched on it previously, it's all regional data. We see it with different varieties coming through, and a variety of grass that performs particularly well in Scotland isn't performing just as well in the south of England. Maybe issues with ground root. There's just so many different variances in data, and I think it's something Pierce picked up on there. There's so many different variances, and there's no actually set standard that everything can be compared to. And that's probably one, and I can see that even in our home farm as well. There's no set standard. In Northern Ireland, we have a group running Arc Zero. I'm sure you've heard of them, John Gilliland and co. And certainly they've done an awful lot of work towards, the measuring carbon on the farm. Should it be the carbon output of the farm or the carbon sequestration of what the farm's doing in terms of using up available carbon? But I haven't actually seen anywhere yet that's given me a firm standard that everybody can say, right, that's what we're aiming towards. That's what we're going to compare our business to. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that we'll have going forward, just in terms of carbon.
Thank you. I'm going to move it on a little bit. Actually, there's a question from Northern Ireland from Mark McCollum, who says, I think you probably know him, do you, David? It says, we at Farmers are very good at producing high-yielding, high-quality produce, especially here in Northern Ireland. But actually, are we any good at marketing our produce in the UK? And how can we as farmers improve in order to benefit our industry? So a very broad question, I guess. Andy, what do you think to this? I mean, as a farmer to farmer advice here, I guess, how can we as farmers improve the marketing of what we do?
You're probably not asking the right person, actually, because I don't do any marketing. All of our marketing, grain marketing, is marketed through a third party. So all of our grain goes into a central store and gets marketed by them. So I don't have that luxury or that knowledge, really. But it's a massive part of our business, isn't it? If you've got a shed full of grain, to market it wisely and sensibly is crucial, and hence the reason that I don't do it. I mean, we have experts that do that for us, so it means that I can sleep at night and not have to worry about whether I've made the right or wrong decision. So yeah, that's kind of all I have really on that.
I guess that's good advice in itself. Recognise where perhaps your limitations, probably the wrong word, but recognise where your limitations are. But certainly make use of experts that are out there that can do things better than you can. Maybe stick to what you're good at, and where there's somebody else who can do it better, certainly take advantage of that. Roddy, what are your thoughts on this? I know it's probably not a question for anybody specifically, but it's certainly good to get your points of view.
Yeah, there are AHDB, etc. out there. It has a role to play. Processors, food manufacturers are also, but I think as farmers we have a role to play too, in engaging with the public and telling our story better. And we've got to take some responsibility ourselves to deliver. So getting involved in initiatives like Open Farm Sunday, hosting that, or getting involved in another farm to tell the story, to explain all about UK agricultural and food production. Is there and being willing to, if you engage with, my grandkids are 11 down to 6, so engaging with them, they soon become your advocates if you tell them a good story. And it always amazes me that when I'm out with my circle of friends, which includes farmers, some lawyers, some accountants, etc., most of the conversation focuses on the farmers, about what's going on. Nobody wants to know about what a lawyer does day to day. We kind of assume we know what they're doing. Bloody boring, no interest. More interest in understanding what's going on the farms and what the challenges, what are the good things, what's happening, etc. So I think being willing to engage and not handing everything off to somebody else to deliver for you would be the message I would put on. Take some responsibility yourself for selling your story and agricultural sector as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you. Having a little bit of difficulty hearing you, Roddy, in some points, but I understand that everybody out there should be able to hear you fine. So that's what we're being told by the people hosting this Farmers Weekly Transition webinar. David, do you want to mention anything, to a special message to Mark McCollum?
No, Mark. Obviously, a quiet night in Korean if you've tuned in to listen to me. What Mark knows me as well as anybody, and he knows that no matter where I go, I'm the first one to shout about agriculture in Northern Ireland. Yeah, I'm picking up on some of what Roddy's saying, but I think we are fairly far there, and probably it's one of those questions that you really wish there was an official here from the Department of Agriculture or from government or even a Minister for Agriculture, and you would really like to put it to them and say, any chance of you giving farmers a fair crack at the whip, because we're jumping through hoops. We're doing our best. We're doing our best to educate people. We're doing our best through, should it be regional shows, should it be through Red Tractor, whatever the case may be. We're living up to these standards. We're producing our produce at the highest standard we physically possibly can. We're doing our best to engage with the wider community who are not farmer based, who don't know what goes on. We see it over at home with Bank of Ireland Farm Weekend Open Days, Balmoral Show, things like that. We're really it's a fact of the town comes to see what happens in the country. We're doing all that, but unfortunately, we're seeing imports coming in from countries that aren't doing a fraction of what we're doing and aren't jumping through a fraction of the hoops that we're jumping through. And it's a question. I think if somebody was here from either department or government, they'd be rubbing around their shirt collar at this stage.
Thank you. Piers, have you any ideas on this one?
I think I agree with everything that's been said so far, but I think the only thing I'd add would be knowing your customer and getting to know them really well, understanding them. We need to tell the story about why British food is better, but also producing producing the product that they want. So if that's the specification, the carcass specification, or whatever it is, trying to produce to that and trying to deliver the product that the consumer wants as well is really key.
I apologise for sort of flitting about a little bit in terms of questions, but we spoke about carbon earlier on. There's a question here from Ian Silcox Crow from nutrition experts, liquid fertilizer specialist, Omex Agriculture. It's a question from NatWest. Ian says, are carbon emissions or the management of carbon emissions now an assessment factor when banks look at farm business performance? Are you increasingly looking at that, Roddy?
I can only respond in what we are doing. At this moment in time, as we speak today, we are not looking not looking for an absolute level of what the emissions from the business are. We are trying to build up our knowledge from some of the tools that we use already to get that. But carbon emissions, impact on climate is another risk that businesses will face moving forward. And we're a risk-based business. We make decisions based on levels of risk. So in the fullness of time, it would not surprise me if we do go down that way in looking at emissions. At the moment, it's more about engaging with our customers to understand where they're at on this journey, what they're thinking, how their business may adapt. Many of our customers are doing something with a carbon tool because that's being asked of them by others in the supply chain. And yes, there are challenges around what information the tools give. You get slightly different answers depending on what tool you use. But to my mind, if you're being asked to use a tool and to demonstrate, you find a tool that delivers for you, you accept the nuances of that tool, but it's a journey. And you're getting something, as I said at the start, you've got a baseline, and if that's showing and moving in the right direction, well done and good, and continue with that. What was the other part of the question again, Johan?
Well, it was about carbon and our carbon emissions, or the management of carbon emissions, now an assessment factor when banks look at farm business performance. So do you consider that?
No, but I think it's for businesses to start thinking about their place there and the risks that they may have. And I say we're flagging it and wishing to have meaningful discussions with our customers about it and what they see themselves doing and what they can do as we go forward.
I mean, it is certainly something that is affecting larger multinational companies in terms of not only legislation but also in shareholder expectations. And those companies, I think, especially when they are buying from farmers and processing food, will then want to know the carbon footprint of that food. So there will be an increasing requirement to do just that.
Yes, yeah. Corporates are going to have to start reporting their Scope 3 emissions. So that's from above the supply chains above and below them. So that comes back to collecting data in some form or gaining data what's coming in the supply chain. And a number of those corporates are working with their supply base to see how they can move things forward. And we have been involved in a couple and trying to help incentivize some actions to drive benefit to all in terms of more sustainable farming methods and reduction in emissions.
Andy, one of your goals has been 30% cut in carbon emissions. You feel that not only has an environmental benefit, but that is improving your farm business performance too, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure where that quote came from, to be honest with you. It's been kicking around for a while, but certainly it's something that we're looking at doing. We've used a carbon calculator, as has been said before here. There's a huge choice when it comes to carbon calculators. My advice would be use one and stick with it and use it as a sort of self-benchmarking tool to see how you're performing. It's relatively easy to get the data together. It's data you've already got. 9 times out of 10, it's data that's sitting there on your laptop or your farm PC. Put it into a carbon calculator, see where you are, and do the same again. I mean, I probably last completed a carbon calculator probably 3 years ago, and I probably should do it again now, really. But at the time, it was telling me that we're 400 tons negative. Now, I'm very skeptical about that figure, but it's a benchmark for me. It's a line in the sand. So when I put the information in again, I can see whether we're heading in the right direction or whether we're going backwards. I hope we're not going backwards. We've made some inroads into cutting our fuel usage with the methods that we use. We've cut our fertilizer back as well, so that has a big effect on our carbon footprint, as does increasing our organic matter levels in the soil, which again we're looking at doing. So I'm confident we're moving in the right direction, and actually I see a carbon calculation as a means of assessing that as we go along.
Thank you. And Piers, you were talking about earlier the lack of a common standard, as it were, right across the board. I guess that's going to like Andy says, stick with certainly with one. You want to use the same tool to measure what you're doing rather than flitting about. Otherwise, you're never going to come up with a consistent sort of result, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge that we've seen in the industry quite a lot over the last few years, or a bit of a change in the industry. That there are a lot of different tools around, and it's not about necessarily saying one is better than another, but there are different people who want to use different tools, but they all require the same core base data many times, and it's something that I think has changed over time, where we've got to get better at about sharing data, about being able to push it from one system to another, to make use of it more effectively. So if you do want to try two different carbon calculators, you can push the data out of your crop management system into both of them if you want to. The challenge with that has always been the standardization and the structure of how people put this data together. So that's something that we're very aware of and are working hard on. And it's just a change in perception. People don't want that big sort of necessarily that one big monolithic product that they're going to that will be their whole farm recording system. They want to be able to use different things from different people, which have got their own built-in advantages for whatever reason. So having that structure of data, that standardization of data, and that sort of core methodology, will then impact a much wider group of people, much wider industry,
and ultimately improve your own on-farm productivity. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So could you sort of expand on that point? And so, as a question here is, what role can data play in improving my farm's productivity?
But I think it goes back to that same point about utilizing data. When I was thinking about some of these questions, I was thinking about some of the simple ways that I've heard of over the years of data changing people. And I go back to one, probably the most simplest example I can think of was a customer of ours up in the Scottish borders who are using the cattle software. And he said, I saw him at a show somewhere, and he said, your software just saved me a fortune. For the simple reason was he had, 150 breeding cattle and his own stock bulls, a mixture of stock bulls and AI. And he had just been recording the data and recording the sales and recording the cost and treating them as a single unit. And then one rainy day, he just decided to do a performance report by sire, just a simple performance report by sire, and realized that one of his sires, was losing money almost every time, and he just said, next day that bull was off the market. It can be that simple, that it's not easy to see on a day-to-day basis when you're out doing the practical things around a farm, but sometimes just being able to pull that data back and just look at it in a slightly different way can give you an enormous advantage. So I think it's, people tend to jump, especially in this industry, people tend to jump to the very big, very complex solutions. I think a lot of the time it's the basics, getting the basics right. Having that output, as Andy said, to have that discussion with other people about what are you doing, what am I doing, what's working better, have you got a good idea, how can we measure that in a simple way. I don't think it has to be about huge data processing processes and extremely clever outcomes. I think sometimes it's just about doing those basics, but just doing them well.
And David, that goes for Barenbrug as well, I guess. I mean, there were simple things that you can do as well as complicated ones, and sometimes we do tend to overcomplicate things and overlook the things that are perhaps not necessarily staring us in the face, but they're around us all the time, so we tend not to notice them.
Absolutely, and keep it simple. That's it. And if anything comes out of this evening's webinar, it's exactly what Andy said earlier on there. He took a measurement of his carbon 2-3 years ago. He has that he was 400 ton negative. he's going to take another measurement. So he has the data there. He's going to measure again. He hopes to see a massive improvement. He's maybe a wee bit dubious about the original figure. The second figure that he takes will either confirm that or maybe start, to make some decisions around the place. But the data is there and it's being used. He's not going overboard. He's not going into it too deeply. People could look, and I have absolutely no idea of the cost implications of farm data software or anything like that. But sometimes, if it takes that spend to have that data to hand, and we do have to bear in mind, I think somebody made the comment before we went live, a group of middle-aged men, we're all sitting here and we're all from a generation where the data is stored in our head. And God forbid anything happened to any of us, how do we pass that data on? So, and, it is quite possible that you could keep it simple and go with a very basic data software package that can store a lot of this information for the next generation. But not only that, for the generation that's working on it, i.e. ourselves at the minute, that you have something that you can work to and compare from, and you can see whether or not you're heading in the right direction. Because ultimately, with costs and everything, and going back onto Mark McCollum's question, we're not getting a fair crack at the whip. Ultimately, we have to be as profitable as we possibly can, and stuff like that, information like that, that's stored that we can act on and change our direction or change our processes, or whatever the case may be. It could be a game changer as to whether or not you're going to survive.
Roddy, you echo those thoughts? I mean, there does seem to be this common theme coming through this evening about measuring success. It is something that starts with measuring that improvement in farm business performance.
Yeah, I think what the guys have said is absolutely right, and it's often the simple things that make the big difference. One of the things I came across early in my career when I was working on farms was some of the best suggestions and improvements came from involving the farm staff. Yes, there are less, but the people that are doing the job, challenge and engage them to see how things could be improved for the benefit of all, and that often throws up surprising results to the benefit of everybody.
Thanks. And Andy, what's the most simple thing you've done then that's led to an improvement in farm business performance?
The most simple thing?
Yeah.
I'll give you one. I'll give you one to give Andy time to think, Johan. It's replace binder twine hinges on the farm gate with proper hinges.
It's all to do with binder twine.
Binder twine, yeah. I'm not sure I can top that, to be fair. I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. You put me on the spot.
No.
Sorry. And I'm thrown by binder twine as well. That's such an old-fashioned.
Still readily available in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, joking apart, there are some simple things that can be done, aren't there, David? Such as measuring sward height, according to where the grass, how high the grass is to your boots or your wellies and stuff like that.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. And utilisation of grass is a very big thing. I spoke at a farmers union meeting the other night ago, and back on to what I was talking about earlier on. There's somebody there from Caffrey who was talking about soil analysis and everything else, and that's a very basic win-win. And unfortunately, an awful lot of farmers, certainly over here, haven't been testing their soil enough, and they've just been going through the same procedure of okay, the slurry ban is lifted, we'll put on our slurry. Okay, fertilizer ban is lifted, right, let's go with the same as we put on last year. And they're throwing good money after bad. And something as simple as a change in direction and things like that there can make an awful difference.
Thank you. Piers, for you? Simple things that can be done?
I'm not sure if it's particularly simple, but yeah, I just go back to what we've done in our own business, and we've got a lot of long-serving staff within our business, and we knew a lot about our products and a lot about our customers and a lot about what customers wanted to do, and so we relied on that knowledge for a long time. And this is a data company talking about it. Then we went back and checked the data. And then we surveyed our customers and actually, found the information rather than our gut feeling. and that actually gave us a completely different picture. And it is about using the data. Just and it doesn't have to be complex. It's just simple things about and a lot of people do have the data. A lot of people are using our systems, but they're not necessarily going in and then just spending an hour pulling out some reports and comparing them, looking at 1 year against the previous year and understanding why there are differences there, and just questioning themselves.
Thank you, Andy. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, no, I just have a bit more time to think about it now, and it was touched on there actually that I think a simple thing would be to involve your staff. We've got some good staff here, some good guys here, and actually we try and sit down once a month now and just have a meeting and just talk about what the sort of next steps are for the business and the next sort of tasks are ahead of us. And actually, that's been a really simple thing and something we should be doing, but it's actually been really rewarding for the business because it makes everyone feel involved, everyone's kept in the loop, and actually has come up with some fairly simple ideas actually within itself, and actually that's been quite a good process to go through.
Yeah, and that's one thing. I mean, we did touch on it. You touched on it earlier on in terms of farmer to farmer, peer-to-peer learning, exchanging information, and that kind of thing. But we've not really explored this whole idea of not necessarily reward and remuneration in that monetary sense, but in terms of talking within the business and making people feel part of the team and exchanging ideas and so on and so forth. That's got to be a good way of improving farm business performance, enabling your staff, if indeed you have any.
Definitely.
Yeah. The other simple thing, I'm not going to give you an answer, is to ask the question why. Why do we do this? Why is this done this way, etc.? And just to challenge yourself honestly and challenge the team honestly and see if there are suggestions of how it can be changed for the better or to be stopped, and not to be constrained by accept history, use it to advantage, but don't be constrained by history. That this is the way it's always been done, and that's why it should continue this way.
And that's true. I mean, people say that's something that is a common attitude within agriculture, within farming, but it is true in all sorts of different walks of life, isn't it? That we tend to sort of be a little bit unquestioning, and we're going back to the middle-aged men thing, a bit stuck in our ways, and perhaps not as innovative as we might like to be. So there is going to be that sort of cross-fertilization of ideas and being a little bit more open-minded, I guess, and willing to change your mindset, which isn't always easy to do. Piers, I'm going to come back to you, and then I'm going to go to David. There's another question here. It says, what do you think are the main roadblocks to technology adoption in agriculture? You spoke earlier on, Piers, about the lack of standardization, which may hold some people back, I guess, in terms of waiting for a standard to come along. The suggested answer here that could make a big difference is integration. I guess different pieces of technology talking to one another. What are your thoughts? And how might we overcome those roadblocks?
I think there's a lot of there's potentially a very broad area, and I think it's changed over my career. When we first used to go out, demoing and selling the farm plan solutions, we'd have to take out a bit of PC with us and set it up in the farm office or in the kitchen and show people how it would work. That's gone. People are much more technically savvy, but I still think that there's a concern about just will I be able to use it? And this comes back regularly from our research. If I purchase something, will I be able to use it? If I can't use it, will I get the support? And a lot of us work within an office situation. We're working with technology all the time. If we're not sure how to do something, we can shout to someone across the other side of the office and get some help very easily. It's a lot more difficult in a typical farming scenario to get that support. And so I think the knowledge that yeah, that I'd be able to use it and I can get training on it and and help with it easily, almost trumps the functionality element to it in some ways. In terms of broadening it out, though, I do think that integration part, which I mentioned before, is important. People who are using systems now want to move on, want to do more with them. They see new things coming along, new apps that'll do particular functions very well for them, and they want that integration. They don't want to rekey data all the time into other systems, and so that's an industry barrier that we have to overcome. And that's becoming so prevalent. When we're looking at anything through to in-cab systems now, that workflow to be able to take a recommendation from an agronomist to the farm owner, for the farm owner to be able to push it out to the operator, for the operator to push it to the machine and complete that loop back again. It's all possible now, but it's technically challenging, and so we've got to make that. We've got to, as I've described it internally before, we've got to iPadize it, make it that simple push click. We can't have that very complex type solution anymore.
Thank you. Thanks, Piers. David, how about you? The roadblocks to the adoption of technology, and how might they be overcome?
I think probably back onto something that I mentioned earlier on, and it's certainly from a local point of view over skill set. We are. I myself personally, I'm okay, and I would just. That's as far as I would take it. Whenever it comes to technology, I am okay. I am very fortunate to have a daughter who you literally can hand a device to and say, "Can you sort such and such out for me?" She'll ask you what your password is. Of course, I'll say I can't remember, and before I know it, she's created a new password, has the problem solved, and hands it back to me. So certainly, skill set's a big thing, and probably the other side of it, that there are many wish lists out there on farms, and certainly technology is probably fairly high up on some of the wish lists, and maybe from a financial point of view, is it something that maybe just gets pushed to one side because people think, there's a pocket of money there, but it's going to be needed elsewhere. We'll let that sit for another year, and we'll maybe take a look at it. And as I say, I have no idea that the cost implications of any of the software that's available, but sometimes maybe other things just take priority, and that's. Yeah, that's an issue going forward, but definitely from my point of view, it's skill set. It would be the like of myself and people of my age group. It's a lifetime since we were at college, and best well in the world when I went to an all boys school, and then I went to a college that the girls at it, and learning was not highest of my priorities at the time. There could very well have been a technology lesson. I probably wasn't listening. I might not even have been there. But there's a skill set, and whether it's a refix for people of my generation to say, we need to sit down again and we need to take a look at this and see what we can do with it going forward.
Thank you. I guess it's similar to what Andy was saying before. If you don't have the skill yourself, use an expert and find somebody who is good at it, be it sort of brain marketing or trying to work the remote control to the TV or whatever it might be. Roddy, how about you? Roadblocks to the adoption of technology, and how might they be overcome?
One that I still find astounding is there are chunks of the country that have poor connectivity and data transfer speed, and
yep.
that is key. I think getting it's there in some areas, but the automation of data collection and transfer, and it also helps with the removing of the human error with my fat fingers, which keys I hit. But it's coming. And the next generation's very savvy. My kids do everything on what I call a phone, but that's the least thing that they use that device for.
Yeah.
Everything is done. They run their lives from it. Everything's contained within it. And I think it's a particular challenge for my generation to do that, but the next generation it'll just be a matter of fact for them, and it will happen.
Thanks, Roddy. And Andy, for you?
Yeah, no, I'm still a bit scarred by the fact you called us all middle-aged earlier on, actually. So I'd never thought of myself as middle-aged, but hey, but I like to think of myself as technically savvy. Roadblocks to the adopting technology, I think, as has been said earlier, is probably cost and fear to a degree, but actually, I think integration of technology is getting better, certainly at a farm level. I think we use many different platforms for various different reasons. And actually, yes, it does take a while to get things hooked up together, but actually we do move quite a lot of data between platforms, and it works. The Isoblast connections on machinery, they're much better now than they used to be. You know, it was always supposed to be plug and play, and it never was. But actually, that's come quite a long way in the last 5 years, I suppose 3 to 5 years. So we are making progress, definitely. And I think, you know, personally, I love the technology. I love all the techie side, and I think it if you're going to embrace it, it can do a lot for you.
Thank you. I'm going to go. There's one sort of last. Well, there's more than one. We're not going to have time to ask them all, but there's one question here, which I think is a good way to probably try and draw the discussion to something of a close. This is from Claudia Spence, and I'm going to broaden this out. Claudia says, as someone who's starting a new farm business tenancy on a mixed farm of 200 hectares in northeast England, what would you recommend as the best tips for maximising profit, diversifying, or being innovative? So let's just assume that it might not be in the northeast of England. It might be bigger or smaller than 200 hectares. But what would be your tips for maximising profit, diversifying, or being innovative? And let's accept that measuring where you are and knowing where you want to get to is going to be a given on that. And I know nobody likes being put on the spot, but I am going to put you on the spot, Roddy, and start with you and say, what would your advice be? The best tips for maximising profit, diversifying, or being innovative? And I'm going to go Roddy, David, Piers, and then Andy.
To my mind, focus on the core business entity first and get that running as efficiently, productive as you can do, and then you can start thinking about the peripheral things. Moving into a diversification takes time, energy, capital, but to my mind, that and you've got to say you don't want the core business to suffer because you're having to put too much resource into getting your diversification up and running to the detriment of the overall business entity. So get your core business in place, have it aligned to the skills that you have, and where you don't have the skills, as been said earlier, bring those in to assist you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Roddy. So yeah, focus on the core business before thinking about diversifying or certainly embarking on a diversification. David Linton.
Yeah, I would start with the soil. You know, the one thing that is determined for you on your farm going forward is the amount of land that you've bought. You can change your stock levels, you can change machinery, you can change all your other factors, but the sheer fact of the matter is the one thing that you can't change is the amount of land that you have. You can, however, change how it performs for you. So back onto what we're talking about, you're measuring for success. Measure your soil now, get it analysed, build on it. Should it be using regenerative techniques to try and increase the root matter, whatever the case may be? The soil is the one thing that will pay you back dividends going forward.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Piers Costley.
I just adding to those points, really, I'd be looking at what are the advantages that you've got, what are the opportunities, you know, the land that you've got, you know, have you got a special advantage? Can you do things better than other people? You know, you're looking to maximize those advantages all the time and try and minimize any disadvantage you've got.
Thank you, Piers. And finally, Andy Basin.
Yeah, no, so I met a delightful couple last week, actually, a brother and sister who'd taken over the family farm, and I don't know the whole story, but it was on some tricky soil, and they diversified into letting out their barns as wedding venues, and they were finally starting to see the rewards of that. So I think, don't be afraid to diversify and play to the strengths of the farm. Don't, if it's not, if the soil isn't great, if it's not exactly as you want it, have a look and see if you can diversify and be innovative as it says there. So don't be afraid to do that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, everybody, for that. We're going to draw it to a close. So this webinar focusing on measuring success, improving farm business performance, and I've been making some notes. I won't keep people too long, but some of the things that we've heard about this evening: measure where you are and know where you want to get to, understand the areas of the business which are performing and perhaps those two that are performing less well. Be flexible, agile and adaptable. Remember that bigger does not necessarily mean that you're automatically going to be more efficient. Communicate farmer to farmer and also make use of experts. Tell your story when it comes to marketing and build links with your suppliers and with your buyers, people both up and down the supply chain. Have a consistent approach, keep it simple, focus on the evidence and on the core business before diversifying. Start with the soil, get it analysed, look for the opportunities and what you can do better perhaps than other people and play to your strengths. And finally, if you can't use the remote control, hand it to the younger generation and they'll probably be able to work it out for you. But in all seriousness, I think there's some good advice there. I'd like to thank our panel, Piers Costley from Farm Plan and ProAgrica, Roddy McLean from NatWest, David Linton from Barenbrug, and Hampshire farmer Andy Bason. Thank you all very much. You'll be able to, if you've watched this, you'll be able to watch it all again on the Farmers Weekly website, fwi.co.uk/transition. That's where our transition webinars are. You can watch it all again. But for now, thank you to everybody, and thank you to everyone who has been watching and who's asked questions this evening. So thank you very much. I'm Johan Tasker. Thank you on behalf of Farmers Weekly.